And that'll be really okay. So thank you all for coming. Thank you everybody on YouTube. And as always, if there's anything that we can help you uh, to get books or any information you need, any questions you have that you want answered, reach us at Buddha Practice Study at gmail.com. So we begin with our opening prayers, the altruistic motivation. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang wa je pe tra no pa je pe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sim chen tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dang drel nur du la na me pa yang dag pa zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to pa ja. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Tu de ring ne sung te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root Lama and lineage Lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Transcend Sawa Dangur Parje Pe Pal Dan Lama Dampa Nam La Kab Suchi O. Yedam Kil Gur Gila Sok Nam La Kab Suchi O. Sangye Chom Dende Nam La Kab Suchi O. Dampe Cho Nam La Kab Suchi O. Pape ge du nam la kab su chi o. Pa wo ka dro cho kyung song me song yes she gi chang dang. Dam pa nam la kab su chi o. Taking the Bodhisattva vow, page 4. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind, and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path. I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shangju Ningpo Chi Ba Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Chodang Shangshub Sampayi Soklang Deshin Kapsu Chi Jitar Nongyi Deshegi Shangshub Tugni Ki Padang Shangshub Sampe La Pala De Dagrim Shin E Patar De Shin Dro La Pandandu Shangshub Samni Ki Gishin De Shin Du Ni La Pala Rinpa Shindu La Pa Ji O. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chodnamla Shangju Bardu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi Drola Penshir Sangye Jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem chantam she dewadang dewe gurdang dembar jorchi. Dugnal dang dunel gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dugnal me pe dewadang mi drawar jorchi. Nay ring jack dang ni dang drawe dang namla ne pa jorchi. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Pa Drista Dredo Mebawa Suto Kayo Mebawa Supo Kayo Mebawa Anu Rektu Mebawa Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sitsa Me Sitsan Shriya Kuru Hung Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sara Tada Gata Bajra Mame Mansa Bajri Baba Maha Samaya Satwaha. In English, Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus, I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Justa Jado Mebawa Suto Kayo Mebawa Supo Kayo Mebawa Anuraktu Mebawa Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sutsa Me Sitsan Shriya Kuruhung Ha 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 ho Bhagawan Sara Tadagata Bajra Mame Mansa Bajri Bawa Maha Samaya Satwaha Om Bajra Satwa Samaya Manupalaya Bajra Satwa Tenopa Justa Jado Mebawa Suto Kayo Mebawa Supo Kayo Mebawa Anuraktu Mebawa Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sutsa Me Sitsan Shriya Kuru Hung Ha 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 ho Bhagawan Sara Tadagata Bajra Mame Mansa Bajri Bawa Maha Samaya Satwaha. Likewise be extinguished, extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are within me, please be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink peacefully. Enjoy it and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions about the prayers or anything that we've talked about recently? Okay. Kunga wanted to say something yesterday. We didn't have enough time. So, Kunga, would you like to speak right now?
Sure. So Matthew had asked or talked about his impression or his questioning about the all the different deities in the Tibetan practices, and how that could be a barrier for some people, for trying to reach some non-conceptual place. We have all these conceptual things we're filling up our mind with. But I just wanted to share that I've been doing the Buddha Shakyamuni visualization practice. And part of that practice, I've noticed that I was sitting in meditation before I started doing that practice, and I would have a feeling of really, positive kind of feelings that I would generate during the practice, but then I would kind of grab onto them, and they would just kind of go away really quickly, right? And then I found myself in this weird spot of wanting to have those feelings again, but knowing also that the minute I wanted to do that, that was creating a barrier to just experiencing the meditation. But I noticed that when I was having doing the practice with the Shakyamuni Buddha, and part of the visualization is that just releasing all those feelings. Like once you've taken the Buddha into yourself, you're sort of sending out all this light of wisdom and support. And I noticed that when I would generate those positive feelings within myself during my meditation, if I just sent those out, then they kind of stabilized, and it didn't create a hindrance. I could just experience them and send them out, and experience them and send them out. And I was thinking when I was doing that practice, oh, wouldn't that be great, if I could just take this into my everyday life when I'm working with my patients and things. If I could just remember this, and sometimes, when I'm just sitting there, I could just send that to them, and so I kept thinking about that, and I kept writing in my journal at the end of the day, oh, it would have been great if I would have remembered to do that today. But then last Friday, I actually remembered, when I was actually sitting with a couple of patients, I was remembering, oh yeah, I can do that practice right now for them. And I found that really helpful in my interaction with them. I was able to normally where maybe I would have just been more sitting and listening, I felt a little bit more giving them positive feedback just because remembering that practice and that idea. And so that was just a way that I found the visualization practice came out in my normal everyday life as a way to get in touch with that kind of positive feelings, that a way to remind me to put it out there, which I think I didn't have, the same feeling. I didn't have that same understanding before I started this practice. So it was just kind of a way that I found that this visualization practice allowed me to connect with some of the paramitas in a way that I knew about. I mean, I was trying to connect with them, but I was able to connect with them in a different way. So thank you.
Well, it's really good. So you took the practice and you applied it to a real life situation.
Yeah. And I mean, both on the cushion in my meditation practice, it was helpful in that way.
Right.
Just having a barrier there, but also just in my interaction with my patients as well. I found it really helpful to have that visualization, that kind of concrete image to kind of grab into and to remind me to provide these support, which is not necessarily a concrete thing you're providing, right? It has a lot of different, could look in a lot of different ways. So it's sort of sometimes it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what you want to do.
Well, that's really good. And, they say, if you know one Buddha, you know all the Buddhas. So what we're calling upon is recognizing the Buddha within ourselves, is already there. It doesn't have to descend, it's already there. And then it comes out, but the way in which it comes out is the same as all the Buddhas, and that's a beautiful, it becomes effortless. So the more that we keep our heart open, the freer it becomes, the more it comes out, the easier it is.
Kungo, what type of work do you do? I apologize if I'm not recalling. You work with youth, right? In a like a group home, or like, forgive me for not recalling the details correctly.
I'm a hospice social worker.
Oh, okay. So the visualization practice, thank you for that, because that's very important work. So the visualization practice that you did that helped you like kind of transcend into a deeper level of, I guess, compassion. What was it? And I apologize because I wasn't actively involved yesterday and I haven't been able to watch the YouTube yet. So what was the visualization?
It's the Shakyamuni Buddha deity practice that Pema Dorje introduced back in the summer when he was the first deity practice in the deity book.
Okay, for the Sunday practices.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so cool. It's very inspiring to hear other people privately in this group share when they have breakthroughs. It's encouraging because like each of us has different breakthroughs in different ways, and so it's so nice to hear you describe that, especially in the line of work that you're doing. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, very useful.
Thank you, Kunga. Yeah, I try to do something kind of similar with my patients when I am working with them. I don't remember the majority of the time, but sometimes when I'm sitting with them, it's cool. Thank you for your comments and for sharing that.
Do you, Matt, do you have an office in which you work, or do you move around different places?
I work out of an office.
So your clients, your patients come into your room and so on like that. And Gunga, I suppose you move around quite a bit. You're going to patients' homes or into their rooms in the hospice center or whatever like that. But what I was thinking about was, for Matt's situation, if in his room, in your office, if you had a way of being able to have some kind of an object that maybe is behind your client, your patient, they don't see it, but you see it, in the field of view that you have with your patient, might be a very good, reminder to help stabilize, that giving of that Buddha nature within yourself for their benefit.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I did this. Oh, that's not what I do. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay. So we've been going and asking folks to give a little bit of their autobiography. So I've asked Matt if he will speak a few minutes about his. So Matt, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I don't I mean, I'm not like trying to be humble or something. This is just genuinely, I don't have as kind of lengthy or as interesting or as in depth of a Dharma history as, a lot of the other people who have shared. But I guess, what would I say about it? Maybe like about 15 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. I was at a very, I was troubled when I was younger in a lot of ways. And, was at a very low point in my life. Was suicidal, all kinds of stuff, abusing substances and things. Um, and I heard of, I had no like background in anything to do with Buddhism, or I mean, I knew what Buddhism was in the same way that anyone in the world knows that Buddhism exists. But then someone said something to me about it, this random person, and then for some reason it like just really clicked for me. Um, and I became very, very, very interested in Buddhism, and in spirituality. I was very secular, atheist type of orientation that I developed over time. But anyway, and then I found some things that were impactful for me was like seeing the videos of like Lama Yeshe, like his introduction to Tantra videos, like very early on when I first started getting interested in it. And there was something about his presence or energy in those videos that was very, very inspiring for me. Um, then started looking at people like Ram Dass and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. There's some of their teachings, and saw some different teachers. Then I studied within the FPMT for a little while, but it just didn't end up being like that great of a fit for me. And I would get I had difficulty with the Tibetan forms at times. I found I was drawn to it in some ways at first because it was very exotic and exciting, but then I started having troubles with some of the traditional Tibetan forms and presentations of things. I do have a very secular kind of mindset, I guess. But yeah, and also another very big influence on me has been with Advaita Vedanta, which is a kind of non-dual, nominally Hindu, but really non-dual Indian tradition as well, and particularly a teacher named Ramana Maharshi, who was alive in the I guess the early 20th century, mid 20th century. Yeah, and so my practice kind of waxed and waned. It never went away completely, but there were some periods when I was very dedicated to it, and then some periods where I just had trouble sticking with it. And I was very interested in Garchen Rinpoche. I think it was originally from seeing the Yogis of Tibet or something like that video that he's featured in, and seeing the going speaking to your impact of films, Lance, that you talk about. I think then I might have at some point, I don't know if it was before then or not, seen the for the benefit of all beings as well. And then I went to the teaching that he gave in Fairfax maybe 7 or 8 years ago for the Amitabha teachings, and took refuge with him, and that was an impactful experience. And then had really fallen off with my practice in a big way, and I live pretty close to the Dharma Surya Center, so I was looking into that and getting involved. And then that was when originally Lance's Buddhism 101 group was listed on there. I just randomly dropped in one night, and that was like about a year ago. And this group has been a very impactful thing for me. I feel much more rooted in Dharma practice in a way that I haven't before at any other point in my life. A big thing that's been tough for me is that I don't know anyone else who's interested in this. It's not like there's like this doesn't exist in my life. It's just this weird, like weird thing that I'm into. That I mean, no one's like gives me any crap about it or anything, but just I have no kind of community around it. So the way that the Dharma has been presented here with you, Lance, and I also really want to highlight like the other people that have been involved in the group, everyone here tonight, or even on WhatsApp, or who have come to the other groups, having that sense of community. And I've really tried to prioritize a big part of my practice, like coming to these groups, because that definitely kind of grounds me and keeps me on track. Yeah, and overall Dharma has been a very powerful thing in my life. Pretty much it.
Well, very good. Thank you very much. Anybody have any comments or questions for Matt?
Matt, I really like how practical you are when you like talk about stuff. So one of the things that just kind of hit for me too, it's like I don't have a community really here either. Right? It's like this, like you said, it's like this thing, like it's there, like I practice or I'm interested in Buddhism and incorporating that. But having the space to talk about it openly or freely is like kind of like similar for me in the way you just described it. So it's like what I do with you all, right, as my community, but then having a local community where I'm able to really like, like go on a walk with Lance, like a version of that and be like, hey, let's talk about like karma. I don't have that experience either. So it's interesting hearing you talk about it. Is that's sort of been my experience last several years. Like this is very like a warm hug for me coming to these groups. It just feels so peaceful. So it's kind of nice and refreshing to hear, like, I mean, in a good or bad way, that you have that same experience in your own community. I find that the same thing is here. So it's interesting. It's like it's there, but like no one makes fun of me or anything, but it's interesting, sort of. It's like not like you would talk about Christianity, right? Or another more dominant religion in the Western culture where you'd be constantly talking about the Bible or Jesus or something as part of the actual culture every single day. So anyways, thank you for sharing that. That was very, very helpful.
I'm curious about one thing, and maybe you all can answer this, and that is, does the fact that this is lay people exclusively, and and does that make a difference to you in any way? I mean, you live right around the corner from Dharma Center, and you've gone over there from time to time, but to go over there on a regular basis as opposed to what we do here, does the lay people issue, does that make a difference to you?
Maybe. I don't know if lay or monastic is necessarily the distinction that makes the difference for me, more so than just easier to relate, I think, to the people in the group and to you, just through similar experiences. Just culturally, maybe on some level too. Than like than the Tibetan community, to be honest. Maybe that's part of it. We're just needing to spend more time over there and meeting more people and stuff. But yeah, the presentation of it is here. I think that part of it of just being able to feel very comfortable and naturally resonate with other people in similar situations than me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Lance, to answer your question for me as well, because we do have there's a Tibetan center in downtown Charleston. Geshe La, like he's from Tibet, and I think I'd have to go see the lineage, but anyways, they practice Sunday. They do 1 hour in the morning, and then they do like an hour teaching 6 to 7 on understanding Buddhism, like 101, like a version of that. And that's nice. Like you said, you always say, if you can go into the temple, go into the space, it's so much more impactful if you can get in there. And I do agree with that. The thing that I like about this particular group, it's very practical and real. Like it's almost like translational work where it's like this very conventional, and actually, I think you're fundamental in helping us bridge that and translate that, where you have done years of work and study, and then you're able to use through like analogy and practical conversation, translate it, like when you say certain phrases and you're like you're going through this moment. And I think that would be hard for me to have that experience at the temple here, right, with the monk here. Like he wouldn't be able to talk to me that way culturally, right? He didn't grow up in this culture. You're able to be like, look, I've spent like decades of my life studying this, and it's actually like a huge blessing for us to have you translate it for us in ways that are just like super real for this culture. So I don't know that I'd have the same experience. I don't know if that resonates with anyone else. I think you're fundamental is what I'm saying. Like you are like a huge bridge because I've had experiences with Tibetan monks and I can't talk like this and be like, hey, my mom just did this thing. And you're like, suit of armor. You're like, wear your suit of armor. Like, you understand how to talk to me in a way that you're like, that's that concept. And here's the practical way. Put your suit of armor. That's medicine Buddha happening right now. But you're like, hey, put your suit of armor on. And that's what I need to hear. And then you connect it with the concept. So like, without you, there's no way I would have made the growth I've made. So, not to blow up your ego, Lance. No pride. No pride.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
And to be clear, I'm not trying to like denigrate what they're doing at Dharmavistar, and I plan on going there more. But this just really works for me. That's really just what I mean. I feel bad, like as if I was saying that.
No, absolutely. I don't take it that way. And, whatever I've been able to work on has been because of that, my participation in those groups and everything. And I wouldn't want anybody to think that this replaces that, because it doesn't. It just supports it. It just gives you some more confidence to be able to go in there and have some things, to be able to, have some of the gears mesh up together with each other and see how it works in your life and so on.
Yeah. And just the last thing I'll say kind of about my, I guess, journey here, because it relates to what we're just talking about now, is that a big deal for me is kind of grounding myself with Garchen Rinpoche and his teachings and his lineage and Drikung Kagyu more generally, because I'm someone who devotion isn't something that comes very naturally to me, I guess, something like that. And for I was gonna say, for whatever reason, maybe karmically, but for good reason, I have like a very pure kind of trust in Garchen Rinpoche.
Sure.
And I feel like if I follow in that as a North Star, that I won't go wrong. And this, I came to this within that lineage. So that's a big deal for me as part of this too.
Certainly, yes. And this lineage, really supports lay people. Lay people is not excluded in any way, and lay people can attain enlightenment as much as the monastics can. It depends on their path, but they're not excluded from it. Debbie, you had your microphone on a minute ago. Did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, no, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of graduate school. I studied anthropology in graduate school. And when you go to the Gompa and you listen to the monastics, it's like that. It's like your seminars. You get in there and you bring all this attention and learn, but you also need to come together with your fellow students. Like, you have to do both, right? There's a whole bunch of, it's not that you're talking BS for a little bit, but you need both, right? That you learn best that way, where you have, that community of people that you can sit with, led by you, because you are that good. But yeah, to just talk and have it make, talk ideas out and practices out and yeah. So I think that it's like two sides of the same hand. I think you need both.
One thing I was gonna say, Debbie, you're right. Like, it's the conceptual plus experiential, or knowledge and demonstration. Like, because I like the graduate work, like teaching people to do technique. I'm like, first you have to understand the concept, and then you go practice it in the real world and get feedback and coaching. Like, did you do it right or not? And that's how people learn. And one of the things that I would love, because I know meditation is everything, is and that's what we're doing on Sundays. One of the things I think that would be cool is talking more about action bodhicitta in practical ways in the Western society, like what people actually are doing. Like, are you smiling? Are you going to donate blood? Those are things that I'm really interested in. Like talking, like almost like you giving us homework, actionable homework, and be like, okay, did you go do this thing? Like trying to generate good karma, right? And like, versus talking about and sharing about it, be like, hey, go do this, like this week, go and randomly write someone a positive note or something, or go donate time somewhere. Those are things I'm constantly thinking about, like action bodhicitta, constantly what that looks like in a person who lives in the Western culture, who has to work and who has all these other responsibilities. What does that actually look like? Because like we all have to pay bill, like that, Lance, we all have to pay bills and all this. So what does it really translate to in a Western culture that's so driven by capitalism, where no one's paying attention, right? Like no one has kind words to say. They just want to cuss you out and write negative reviews. That's what people have time for.
All right, well, that's an interesting suggestion, and I think it's a good segue for what we're going to talk about tonight. I think so yeah, keep that in mind. Meshing up with our talk tonight. I'd also like to draw everybody's attention to our prayer book, the red prayer book that we've got, the daily practice, and go to page 38, and that is the food offering prayer. So the first line says the precious Dharma is the supreme teacher. So we're saying this prayer, as like saying grace, to the precious Buddha, the supreme teacher, to the precious Dharma, the supreme protection, and to the precious Sangha is the supreme guide. To these three jewels, the objects of refuge, I make this offering of food. So it's talking about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Sangha, there is the noble Sangha, which are the great bodhisattvas, the 8 great bodhisattvas, and great beings like them. But then there's the ordinary Sangha, and maybe we can consider ourselves to be that. But it's through our interaction with each other that we're guiding each other. We hear each other's situations, we see similarities, we make suggestions and so on. And it's through that we're really, I think a lot of the work is done. We have the inspiration of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the noble Buddha, the noble Dharma, and the noble Sangha, but it's in that ordinary level that where the work is done, so it really helps us. So saying a prayer like this always reminds me of that. It kind of grounds me in how every day there's a prayer, there's a practice that I can do when I eat, 2-3 times a day or whatever. I can say this, I can say it in the English, I can say it in the Tibetan. But it's all these prayers, remember, are remembrances. We're remembering why we're doing things and so on. So I think they're necessary parts of our transformation into becoming a better person, a spiritual person, and so on like that. So we shouldn't marginalize them. We should embrace them and bring them into our lives.
Lance, from a technical perspective, do you read this before you eat, like grace? Do you say it like grace?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So like before I eat my dinner, I can just literally do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. That's actually really helpful. I didn't know that. It's super practical. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, you can do it in the English. That would be easiest first, get the meaning, and then maybe you can do it in the Tibetan, and that's always a great thing. When we're with the lamas and around the table and having lunch or whatever, and everybody be able to recite that together is a great boon for them. Because we're meeting them halfway, in their language to do these practices and prayers. And it really is heartwarming for them to know that they're being accepted.
Very good point, and thank you for drawing attention to this prayer. I don't believe I've ever read it, so I'll be very thoughtful now and read this now before at least one meal a day. Thank
Well,
you.
very good. Yes, and maybe you can hand write it on a little card that you keep by your placemat when you eat, and it'll remind you, and you can memorize it very quickly.
I like here that I'm reading it actually, and I don't know if have we ever read this in any of our have we ever read this with you in any of our practices other than you just talking through it?
Well, if you've had a meal with me, you've heard me say it.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm just reading the practicality where it's like food is medicine, which I agree with. Like I agree with that. So I'm just reading, is that part of the prayer or is that just more explanation to the prayer?
That is a little bit more detail if you want to
Okay.
get more into it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the second part. So very often, sometimes the lamas will go into the greater detail, of that, but they say it in Tibetan, so you don't recognize it. But here it's spelled out for us to be able to see it. So it's really good. It's all these things. That's the thing about the Tibetan Buddhism that I love is that everything has a connection. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a meaning to it. Nothing is just thrown out, loosely or anything like that. It all comes together to help you to stabilize your practice.
So true. I totally agree with you. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so if you don't mind, I'd like to get into chapter 4 of the Lalitavistara Sutra and talk some more about this. So, what I want to do is give a little bit of an explanation, give a little bit of an introduction that is on the first 2 pages. So it'll be 4.1 to 4.8 or so. And then I want to recite the teaching that the Buddha gave, and then we can talk more in detail about some of the aspects that are in here. So this chapter is called the Gateways to the Light of the Dharma. The Gateways to the Light of the Dharma. Now, remember that this is taking place in the heaven of joy, Tushita. This is before the Bodhisattva, in capital letters, the Bodhisattva who is to be the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is in this heaven of joy and hasn't come into a body. But in this heaven of joy is surrounded by these bodhisattvas, is surrounded by these gods and goddesses and other holy beings and so on, who are all in this unembodied state. So what he's teaching is the gateways to the light of the Dharma, because their job, what they are about to do, is to sublimate into a body form in order to bring the Dharma, to bring the teachings, to bring what the heaven of joy is, the essence of the heaven and joy, to these poor beings who are down in this samsaric life, on this planet Earth or wherever other places are, to the world and so on. And last week we talked about Meru and we talked about the 4 continents. So we can talk about that as being the world and so on, this samsaric experience that we're all going through. So he's saying to them, please come listen to the Bodhisattva's final teaching on the Dharma, a recollection of the Dharma entitled The Application of Practice. The application of practice. So this went to, what Kunga was talking about earlier on, about having a deity experience, doing a deity yoga practice. But then how do we apply that to our ordinary lives? How do we elevate our lives with that? And those who are around us, how do we do that? So this is the application of passing, in terms of we're going to move from our heaven of joy and we're going to pass into this lower level, if you will, in order to be able to help these beings that are preparing themselves for that. He's preparing them for that. So this is passing from one level of existence to another. So the Bodhisattva takes his seat, the Bodhisattva who is in capital letters to differentiate him from the ordinary Bodhisattvas. He is the Bodhisattva to become the Buddha. He takes his seat on this grand on this grand lion throne. And and he's presenting himself to these gods and so on in order that they become inspired to incarnate as the Hindu teachers teaching the Hindu teachings. So he makes a point that this throne comes about by the merit. The throne is a symbol of the merit of what it has taken the Bodhisattva lifetimes to get to, and these other beings who have their respective thrones also, is a result of their merit. It's on that seat that they sit, which is a coagulation or a coming together of their merit, which is the wisdom and the methods in which they are actualizing the Dharma for the benefit of other beings. He greets these gods and so on as friends. He doesn't call them, brothers and sisters or anything like that. They're unembodied, but they're friends, they're spiritual friends. And this is one of the things that I've always been impressed with Garchen Rinpoche, is he always calls, the Sangha that's in front of him for teachings and practice, he always calls them friends. So I think that's a really nice thing, and I think of everybody as friends as well, not that I'm at that level, but that's a practice, to think about it in those terms. So everybody's approaching what is considered to be, he in particular, his final existence. He's up in this unembodied state, knowing he's going to come and have a body, but this is his final body. He's bringing the Dharma, to these people, these human beings and so on. So he begins, and he's doing this by demonstrating this gateway of the Dharma. If you remember when we're doing our Sunday practices, and whoops, 1 second, sorry. And we have this one little mantra that we recite doing this. Let me just get it in front of me so I can say it correctly. So there's this one, the mantra of interdependent origination. The 12 links of interdependent origination. So I'm looking at our book that we use on the Nundro. I'm looking on page 16. It's on the bottom of page 16, and page 17 is this mantra of interdependent origination. And it's in the Sanskrit, it's Om Yadharma Hetu Prabhava Hetu Takan Tadagato Heo Atata Takansa Yonarada Evamwadi Mashamani Soha, which translated means all phenomena arise from causes. And those causes have been taught by the Tathagatas. The cessation, too, has been proclaimed by the great ascetic, the Shamaniye, so be it. So the Tathagatas are all those thus gone ones, all the Buddhas who have already transcended their human nature. They've gone through being a human being, have been liberated. But here is the Bodhisattva, who is to be the Buddha Shakyamuni, who knows this is his last incarnation. And his job is not to just tell people why they are where they are, but to be able to give them a way to be able to get through that, to be able to cut through that. The Dharma teachings. He's bringing the Dharma to these people so that they could understand it. The Tathagata that came before him, the thus gone ones, the Buddhas that came before him, were telling them of the situation and everything, but they weren't giving beings a pathway out. This is what is special about Buddha Shakyamuni. And this is why, going back to what Kunga was saying earlier about his doing the practice of Shakyamuni Buddha and how it's made a difference in his life, because we're meeting him halfway, and we are, we're paying homage to him through that practice. We realize that, or we're coming to realize that, and so we're paying homage to that and taking that on and allowing that to recognize the Buddha nature that he's explaining to us is within ourselves. He's telling us it's within ourselves, and he's giving us the vocabulary to be able to understand it. So this prayer, this mantra of interdependent origination, is the statement of saying, here is Buddha Shakyamuni, who is the great ascetic, who did this by, kind of pulling back on his involvement in this life, and through his asceticism, he has realized all this. All this has come to be for him, and now he's teaching it to other beings so that they can have the same experience. So this takes us up to 4.5 in this chapter. Then he goes to 4.7, and he says that there are 108 gateways to the light of Dharma. And he goes and he begins to enumerate those. And this goes to what Zara was speaking about. And I want to come back to this. But first, I want to now go. I want to go to 4.36. 4.36 is the teaching that Buddha Shakyamuni, well, as the Bodhisattva, gives to all these gods and these goddesses and so on in Tushita heaven. This is the teaching he gives them. This is the root text, if you will, of the teaching. Then we'll go back to the 108 gateways to be able to look at those and how they come together and so on. But this is his teaching to them. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read it so you can follow along. It starts on 436. So it says, monks, at that time the Bodhisattva uttered these verses in order to bring even more joy to the assembly of gods. At the time that the guide, the lion of men, passes away and descends from the supreme realm of the heaven of joy, he proclaims these words to the gods: abandon all forms of mindlessness. The multitude of divine pleasures, all wonderful things conjured up by the mind, all of this is caused by virtuous actions. So listen now to learn about these actions. Acknowledge the kindnesses done to you. Do not fall back into the three lower realms. After exhausting your previous stores of merit, there is only unhappiness and suffering there. Once you develop respect for me, apply yourselves earnestly by practicing the teachings that you have heard, and you will inevitably attain boundless joy. All desirable things are impermanent and unstable. Nothing is eternal, not even the eons. Everything is like a mirage or an illusion, and as fleeting as lightning or a water bubble. The pleasure brought about by these qualities of desirable things is as unsatisfying as drinking salt water. But those with noble, pristine knowledge that descends the world are satisfied. Goddesses, companions, and beautiful songs are like the audience of a play. They are like a crowd of people who assemble and then go their own separate ways. In the realm of the conditioned, there are no allies, no friends, no relatives, and no retinue. And besides, the karma that results from good deeds also binds one and ever follows behind one's back. We're on 4.44 in chapter 4. Brendan? We're on 4.44 in the book.
Thank you.
Therefore, be harmonious with one another. Act with a loving and benevolent mind. Engage in wholesome activities, for actions done well bring no torment. Please recall the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and do not slip into heedlessness. Those who delight in study, discipline, and generosity are endowed with patience and gentleness. Investigate suffering, impermanence, and lack of self. Examine these three phenomena thoroughly. They occur in connection to causes and conditions. They are void of life and have no owner. Whatever miraculous powers you see in me, and whatever eloquence, wisdom, and qualities I may have, all this is caused by virtuous deeds, arising from study, discipline, and consciousness. For the welfare, benefit, and love of sentient beings, you should emulate me. With your discipline, study, conscientiousness, generosity, restraint, and self-control. For you will not be able to accomplish the auspicious teachings by the mere sound of your voice and speech. Please adopt the right conduct and practice what you teach. Do not simply follow what other people say. Exert yourself with continuous concentration. When acting, one takes the opportunity. Without acting, one does not accomplish anything. Recall all the suffering you have experienced circling through cyclic existence until now. If you fall prey to distortions, nirvana and freedom from attachment will not be achieved. Therefore, having now obtained freedom, a spiritual guide, and a conducive environment, and having met with the superior teachings of the Dharma, you should pacify attachment and the other afflictions. Freed from pride, arrogance, and conceit, always flexible, upright, and honest, dedicate yourself to reaching the transcendence of suffering and apply yourself to realizing the path. Disperse all the darkness and turbidity of ignorance with the lamp of knowledge. Tear the net of error with its latencies, using the vajra of wisdom. What need is there to say many things? It is in your interest to follow this teaching. If you do not abide by this teaching, then it is not the fault of the teaching. When I attain awakening and shower down the teaching that leads to immortality, you who have pure minds should come and listen to the true Dharma. So just a few points, maybe you want to take some notes. Going back to the first on 4.36, at the top of the page here, right above 4.37. The heaven of joy is Tushita, and it's talking about the gods, and the gods we had defined in the glossary as G.213, so you can go back and you can read that. Who are the gods? It's important to know. It says abandon all forms of mindlessness. What does that mean? It means recognize mindfulness. If we're to abandon mindlessness, how do we abandon it? We abandon it by recognizing mindfulness. on 4.39, it says, once you develop respect for me, who is the bodhisattva of true nature. He is the bodhisattva of true nature who has not incarnated yet, but he's coming to our world to bring that true nature, to bring an embodiment of the true nature that human beings innately have, but they might not recognize it because of their defilements. So he's coming to show them so that they can see an ordinary human being, or what appears to be a human being, an ordinary human being in the form of a human being's body, who is displaying that true nature. So once you develop respect for me, that you appreciate who I am and what I'm bringing to you. Then on 4.41, it says, the pleasure brought about by these qualities of desirable things is as unsatisfying as drinking salt water. So he's talking about the negativities, the attachments and everything. Then it says, but those with noble, pristine knowledge that transcend the world are satisfied. That pristine knowledge is clear light. Clear light. Pristine knowledge, pristine cognition. And this is a term that is used in the Bardo Todal. The Bardo Todal is the story, if you will, of what our Bardo of living is. The Bardo is the intermediate, intermediate part of life. There's 6 bardos, and we're in the bardo of living. And the thing that we are learning to recognize is the clear light that transcends these 6 bardos. And we can see all 6 bardos in this clear light. But to get to the clear light, we have to go through the different colored lights, the blue light, the yellow light, the red light, the green light, and the white light, which are represented by the 5 Buddha families, that are symbolized by the 5 Buddha families. So it's through them and through that mastery of that do we finally come to the clear light. So that's what that says. So those with noble, pristine knowledge, the clear light that transcends the world, are satisfied. Then in 4.43, the first sentence, it says, in the realm of the conditioned, there are no allies, no friends, no relatives, no retinue. So that conditioned is talking about this bardo of living, this bardo of living that we are in. And the bardo of reality is the liberation of that. So in the realm of the conditioned are these different aspects, and then in bardo reality, all that goes away. Then in 4.45, it says, please recall the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the 3 jewels that we're so familiar with, and do not slip into heedlessness. Heedlessness is carelessness, taking things for granted. Those who delight in study, discipline, and generosity are endowed with patience and gentleness. Well, those are the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections. So then on 4.49, this third sentence in that stanza, it says, please adopt the right conduct and practice what you teach. This is the Eightfold Path. The right conduct is the Noble Eightfold Path, the 4th of the 4 Noble Truths. And then 4.50, it says, do not simply follow what other people say. Exert yourself with continuous concentration. When acting, one takes the opportunity. Without acting, one does not accomplish anything. This acting is the role play that we engage in the deity yoga. In the beginning, when we first approach deity yoga, you know, it's quite different than who we are on the surface. But the more that we engage, the more that we role play, we learn what Shenrezig is. We learn what Medicine Buddha is. We learn what Green Tar is. We learn what these different deities are. We begin to recognize this within ourselves, and we become those holy beings. We become those Buddhas and so on. But it's saying here, through the role play, through when acting in this, do we take on those attributes? If we just intellectually try and have a transformation, it doesn't really work very well. I can't say it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe it works for somebody, but for most of us, we need this generation stage. That's called the generation stage of meditation. When we talked about the stages of meditation and we went through the different stages, and we always left off at this generation stage because we needed to prepare ourselves by doing the other stuff. But now we're talking about this generation stage of generating ourselves as becoming the deity. And then after that comes the completion stage, where we indeed become the deity. If even for just a moment, we have that awareness, we have that breakthrough. And we say, oh, there it is. But as fast as we see it, it's gone. But then we go through the generation stage time and time again, and we stabilize that generation stage to the point that it becomes a stable completion stage. This is the Vajrayana. This is the wisdom of the Buddha. So then on 4.51, it says, the last two sentences in that stanza, it says, if you fall prey to distortions, nirvana and freedom from attachment will not be achieved. Nirvana and freedom from attachment will not be achieved. What our goal is no self. No self. The ego. That which we are so hard to give up, to cut through, ourself, our mind, our body, our speech, our activities, our families, our jobs, all these things. But the spiritual no self is what we are working for. And once we attain that, then we can, like, to use the metaphor, we re-engage now as no self. You know, the Buddha attained enlightenment when he was about 35 years old or something like that. And he was stable in that enlightenment for the next 45 years or so, whatever it was. He lived to be 80 some years old. So whatever that was, he for 45 years, whatever it was, he lived then as a Buddha, you know, and he was living, breathing as a human being, doing things as a human being, but it was a no self. So that's a fine line to be able to cross over. But that's what we do, and the Dharma leads us in that direction. That's what all this is about, is showing us the way to cross over that, to cut through all the stuff that leads up to it. Then there's no baggage, and then we just cross over effortlessly. We do it and don't even realize we did it. So then 4.52 and 4.53, he's itemizing things here. Therefore, having now obtained freedom, a spiritual guide, and a conducive environment, having met with the four superior teachings of the Dharma, you should pacify attachment and the other afflictions, freed from pride, arrogance, and conceit, always flexible, upright, and honest. Dedicate yourself to reaching the transcendence of suffering and apply yourself to realizing the path. The path is the union of dualism. Dualism dissolves into itself and becomes the one taste, becomes the sameness of things, becomes the equanimity. So these two stanzas here, they're worth writing in big letters and putting it on your wall someplace so you see this all the time, to remind yourself all the time about this, and you can check off these things and say, oh, yes, I've been doing that. Or, oh, no, I didn't do that. Oh, I had an opportunity to do that and I didn't do it. This is where our intellectual mind, we're clearing up, or we're purifying our intellectual mind by seeing the things that we need to do and seeing the things that we didn't do quite right. And by seeing that, we're freeing ourselves from the results of that, from the karma of that. And then you do that, and then it's just opening up the heart, because all that stuff is just blocking up the heart. Then the next page on 4.54, the first line says, disperse all the darkness and turbidity of ignorance. So the turbidity, I had to look that up. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't sure anyway, is the clouded. It's like the clouded. If you take the glass of water that has muddy water and you shake it up, it's the turbidity of the mud, of the dirt in the water, is what the metaphor is here. But over time, that mud will settle down to the bottom, and then the glass will become not turbid, and the water will become not turbid and be clear. You'll be able to see through it and so on, like that. So the turbidity of ignorance. Ignorance is very confusing. It's delusional. So it's like this turbidity. It's like looking through veils, of things, and slowly we begin to remove the veils, and things become clear to us, if only for a moment. And then carrying on in that stanza, it says, with the lamp of knowledge, tear the net of error, the net of error, all these mistakes we make and everything, with its latencies. The latencies are the inactivities that we choose to take to avoid purifying ourselves, to avoid our spiritual nature. We maintain, we get busy doing stuff that prevents us from doing our spiritual stuff. We say, oh, I'm too busy for that. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to study. I don't have time to practice. I got too many things I got to do. And there's no question you have things you have to do, but, can you carve some time? Can you find ways to be able to insert some priceless practices and teachings into your life? And then it says, using the Vajra of wisdom. So the Vajra of wisdom. Vajra, in its simplest terms, its simplest translation, is indestructible. It's the indestructible wisdom. The wisdom that is in our heart center. The wisdom of our true nature. That is the Buddha nature. So, of course, this bears reading by yourself many, many times. But I wanted to point this out to you because I wanted you to see, this is the essence of sutras, is to hear Buddha Shakyamuni in the unborn state, giving these teachings. Everything comes out of these teachings. So the sutras are filled with these kinds of teachings. And that's why we're looking at this. Who better to teach us the Dharma than the Buddha himself? Okay. Any comments or questions?
There's a lot to unpack. This is a great chapter, and I'm working through reading each chapter of this book and taking additional notes. I guess one of the things for me is, I had several things that popped up as you were going through these couple of pages, but I guess one of the things for me that's practical in translating this is I still go back to how to translate this in a Western culture. And I don't know that that needs to be answered. It's more of me contemplating it, right? Like looking at each thing and saying, okay, so one of the things, I don't know if this is relatable to anybody. Lance, you said something profound to me. You're like, if you have to think about it, you're not there yet. You always say these little one-offs, and I take note, like suit of armor, you have a couple things. I'm like, I got it. And that was super easy. When you said that, my brain understood it immediately. This thinking brain understood what that meant for my heart mind. It meant I hadn't done the work yet. Like my heart wasn't open yet. And so when I'm reading through some of these things, ultimately I go back to that phrase you said, if you have to think about it, you're not ready, or you haven't gotten there yet to do it. So like things like involving, if I'm having to overthink, should I do that action for that person or not? I'm not there yet. I'm not Shinreze yet, really, in day-to-day practice.
But there is a role play.
Right. Oh, for sure.
We do have exemplars.
Yes. But like from just living it day to day as my true Buddha nature.
But when you're thinking, am I there? If you have to question it, you're not there.
Correct. Once you said that, though, everything I understood, you're not fully compassionate, Sarah. Your ego is still popping up. Is it the pride? Is it jealousy? What is that little thing that's stopping you? So that for me, like as I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking very much about the distractions of, I want to go to this music concert. There was something that I read recently. It's in the 37 practices. It says, give up things that are not functionally primary to what you need to accomplish, like worldly existence things. So like things like, I love to go horseback riding, right? Or I want to go to this music concert. These are all just distractions from doing the real work in the human life we have. And that is something that happened in the last 6 months for me, because I love going to like live music. I love going to all these piano lessons, horseback riding lessons, but they're all just things, right? They're all distractions for me. They're serving me. And once I reread that, so I've had that 37 the practices, I read it again today. It meant something different today. I finally got it. I said, aha, you wanting to go do those things is for Zara. Like I finally got it, Lance, this morning, because I did my practice. I did my Shinrozege and I had my moment, my light bulb hit, and I didn't have to think about it. I got it. I didn't have to think. I was like, that's what he's talking about. When you stop thinking about it, that's the moment you've transcended that particular obstacle for you on the path. So I got it. So that happened this morning.
Well, good. We put the gold star up next to her name.
I am. I'm gonna
on the refrigerator. Put it up.
I'm gonna burn. I burned some incense. I burned some Nag Champa. That was my treat. So I just
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I wanted to share that. Like this teaching today really resonates today for me especially. So thank you.
We rejoice in your light bulb going off.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's I just say it's a really terrific little few passages in here. It's a very with all of the stuff we're kind of grappling with, there's some of it's the very kind of beautiful and grandiose and all these things with the Mahayana scriptures I'm trying to kind of orient myself towards. Then he drops this like unbelievably pithy, concise hardcore Dharma, stripped down like teaching of just like the whole path more or less in a very just like clear, concise way. It was pretty cool little passage. I liked it a lot.
Very good.
I don't know if anybody else has like read other books like the Bible or Quran or Torah. Like this is just like exactly to Matt's point. Like I could reread this every single day. It's so concise and like you have very little confusion. I mean, you have to contemplate it, yet it's just like, okay, 15, 20 minutes a day, read it and then really think about it. It's beautiful in that way. And I concur with Matt. Like this is from like my own experiences. Like I would go to this every day before picking up, no offense to any other religion, the Quran, for example. I would read this particular chapter first. So I agree.
No, I agree. It's unvarnished, and the mystery has been taken out. That was one of the things I liked about Buddhism from the very beginning. Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism, what was the mysteries were revealed. You know, there's no mystical power about things and so on, and that because the mysteries were created by human beings to serve their self-aggrandizement in whatever way. Here everybody's the same. At one level we don't know anything, and at another level we can know everything.
So Lance, just a technical question, just because I like try to keep everything in my mind, like the Four Noble Truths. So karma, what like the thoughts to turn to the mind, karma is the fourth thought after and within that is the Eight Noble Path, right? The 8 things that we're supposed to do, like right view, right speech. Okay, no. Okay, so I've got
That's in the Eightfold Path is in the Four Noble Truths.
correct. That's what I have, yeah. But karma, like going and addressing how to have good karma, that is the Eightfold Path, right? How we go about our life.
That's what leads to the cessation of the suffering, the cause
Correct.
of suffering.
But
If
that
that's
is
what you
right
said
view.
before and I misunderstood you, I'm
But
sorry.
that's right view, right speech, right perseverance, right
Right.
effort. Okay.
That's the Eightfold Path that
Right.
allows you to cut through
Yeah.
your attachments and aversions and ignorance and so on.
That's the discipline that's required
Right.
to work through this process that could take a long time to get through.
Correct.
I'm curious, Bernie, Debbie, or Lance, even you, was there a particular point where, like chapter 4, where you had that light bulb moment, and now things are just like, so Lance, you're like, when you say, when you have to think about it, you're not there. Did Debbie, Bernie, did you all have moments where you had that clear transcendence or that clear bridge where you're like, got it? And like, do you have like, does it really resonate? Can you talk about it? Was it monumental, or was it super subtle, like how it happened?
It happened a lot. I mean, it happens a lot. I have to admit it. It's happened, well, I guess one of the best examples in the teachings is, before the pandemic, before all his responsibilities, Kempo Samduk was here in Virginia a lot. I had other teachers coming in, and would be looking at particular texts or ideas, something like that. And it was always kind of hilarious because I'd read something and we'd look at it and it's like, oh, you don't take that one. It's like a simple statement. I'm like, oh, it's not quite at base value of that. And so later on, I would realize actually it is exactly what it says. It's great. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from amazing people. I've learned a lot from amazing teachers. And when I first started, for the first few years, there were amazing things, but it wasn't really sinking in. For me, practice has to be led by theory. That's just the way I'm made. And so I can do practice, and it's, well, my practice is going to not be so good if I don't do the theory stuff. And Kempo Samduk is an excellent, really accomplished theoretician who practices it. And so, yeah, sometimes we'd be there over a weekend, and that would happen several times. Sometimes it's just being around, just being around Garchi Rinpoche, doing the Bodhisattva vows. And the first time I took them was with oh my God, Tenko, your guru. He's in Florida now.
You're talking about Drupal Tinley Nimpo?
I couldn't remember the word Drupal. I'm like, it's not Kempo, Drupal. Yeah, Drupal Law. And they're talking about it, and it's like he's like practically glowing, it's like you have these wonderful examples of what they're showing you. And so yeah. It is hard to explain. It always sounds like you don't know what you're talking about or you're crazy because it's hard to describe, right? But yeah, it gets, I've been doing this since 2001. It does get easier. It does get easier over time.
Thank you. Bernie, did you want to say something? Because Zara asked if you had some comments.
Well, this is actually the first time I read this chapter, and I've been reading it as you in this period here. It's a very nice summary. I don't have anything really special to say about it, except what everybody else has said, that it's a nice summary of the Dharma and the path, really. I just have to leave it at that.
Well, there is actually one thing that I did want to say. Sort of jumping around on 439, once you develop respect for me, another one, in 446, investigate suffering, impermanence, and lack of self. 47, whatever miraculous powers you see in me, all this is virtuous deeds. So in that, one of the things that's really great about this is that, the Buddha is not somebody to be obeyed, right? He brings it to you and wants you to investigate. Don't do it just because I said so. Really look at it and, give it a shake and try it and keep at it. And that's really important because that's what he said to us as well. That, in our teachings, if I give you a teaching, look at it, if it seems true, accurate, and good for you, investigate it. If not, just leave it to the side because, there's 84,000 kinds of teaching, right? He didn't want anybody to believe in him. He wanted everybody to do that themselves, right? So it's interesting to see it here in this sutra, which is one of the core documents.
So you're seeing it within yourself. You're seeing the Bodhisattva in capital letters, the potential within yourself to become Buddha.
Yes, and like I said before, he's telling us that what we have, the human body, the human brain, and our true core, we can figure it out. My cat there is very cute. He's not going to figure it out because he doesn't have the equipment, but we have the potential in us. This is something that we can achieve, and I think that's really powerful.
Very good. Thank you.
Lance, I think so. One question I have, and I'd love to just for anyone who wants to jump in if they have like something experiential they'd like to say, is on 441, I guess, and like it talks about, this is like kind of the aha moment I had this morning, but all things, the pleasures brought about by the qualities of desirable things is as unsatisfying as drinking salt water. That's what's happening for me right now. Like, and I'm like, and I don't have to think about it anymore. I'm like, nah, I don't need that. Like I don't have to even think about it for a second as a pro or con. I get it. And I wonder, has anyone else had any of those things where like the value of certain things is like, it's like, like, well, not, but it's just, it's like you don't have any kind of emotional aversion or attachment anymore to it. Not that it's like salt water, but that you don't necessarily have a strong attachment to it where you're like, I have to have this thing or I have to get away from this thing. I'm just curious if anyone experientially has gone through that where you can describe it or it's really palpable for you.
Yes, Brandon.
Once a week, despite my wife's best efforts, I go to the Asian buffet in Chantilly, Virginia. And for $15, it's all you can eat sushi and noodles and things like that. And at the end of that lunch, I say to myself, you know what? That was kind of yummy, but you still got to go back to work. And was it really worth it? And did this really make you happy? And the answer is always no. And I think that kind of, Zara, I think that's kind of what you were getting at there. That it's all kind of not what it's cracked up to be, the material things of this world. There's a lesson in that, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Well, and like you weren't here for the beginning. It's kind of funny that you mentioned the food as an analogy. Lance directed us to the food mantra on page 38, which talks about like one of the things that stood out for me is food is medicine because it keeps eating the right food keeps your mind clear. If you eat food that disrupts your GI, then you're in pain and suffering, right? So if you eat the food that really tastes super good, and actually, you know, it's like listening to like a bad radio station or something. It messes with your brain, and so that it's funny that you use that because it's the same for me, Brendan. I've all the stuff, all the chocolate, the sugar, all the stuff. Like I'm like I get it now. I understand like the cause and effect of all that. So that's funny that you mentioned that.
You feel a lot better walking into the buffet than you do walking out of it. I guess that's probably so.
So right, so right. Another part that I wanted to ask about is 452, Lance, was so having a spiritual guide. So like, and this is a truly naive question from me. Are you like our spiritual guide? Is that appropriate for me to consider you, or is that up to me to decide that? Or like relationally, like what you're doing for us, are you functionally a spiritual guide for us?
Well, certainly, whatever level I can, and but we're a guide to each other. I mean, that's the sangha. We guide each other. We bounce off of each other. So yeah, so in whatever limited way I can do that, that's what we do, and that's part of the work of being a bodhisattva is assuming that kind of responsibility with our brothers and sisters to give access.
So do you feel like you have a responsibility to help each one of us reach enlightenment? That's a genuine question to you right now. To do the best we can to go on that path.
Well, sure. You asked that question last week, and yeah, there is a responsibility, but it's not the kind of thing where I'm going to follow you around and ask you, what did you do yesterday, and why didn't you do this, and why didn't you do that? You should have all the space you want to make your own mind up on these things. You don't need your spiritual guide to be hounding you about these things.
I'm thinking of Milarepa. I'm thinking of Milarepa and something like, I don't know who else has read that, but I'm excited to watch the show where his master, right, like did these tasks with him, right, to trial him. Are there versions of that in the Western culture where the guru or spiritual guide would do that?
Well, that's different. That's different because Milarepa came to him with this very heavy heart and mind and needed to purify himself and cleanse himself. And so he asked for the teachings. And Marpa said, well, he said, well, before we go there, you've got to get to the no self to be able to accept the teachings and be able to process them as a no self and be able to reinvent yourself, if you will, to complete yourself as a complete human being, so it's different in that respect that Milarepa came to Marpa asking for that kind of help. He maybe got more than he bargained for in the beginning, but he realized, what powerful medicine it was that Marpa was making him, engage in.
Does anyone else feel like like we're not nearly as advanced as like well, I'm saying this for myself, like I'm not anywhere near where Lance is as a practitioner. I'm wondering though, for each of us relative to where we are, do you feel compelled to share in like whatever way you can outwardly, like as a bodhisattva, like an action bodhicitta? Are you intentional in trying to cultivate that love in other people when you see the potential without even calling it like oh, I see your Buddha nature? Matt or Kunga, like Brendan, Alex, do you all feel called that way if you see that light in someone else?
I do. I don't know how advanced I am, but you do. It's really easy to become, when you could become more in tune with suffering. Everybody's suffering, even they're not really seeing it. And yeah, I do feel a responsibility. One of my latest kicks is being a retail worker right now is absolute hell because people in the United States are just becoming angrier and more, and it's documented. So every time I see a retail worker, a front-facing worker, I always assume that every time they look at something, they're like, oh, okay, what's this person going to be like? And so, like, really get in there as fast as possible, with everything you have, your voice, your smile, your body language, paying attention, really looking at somebody and seeing them, just like, just try to make this person stay, right? I go to Starbucks or whatever, and, you look, it's like instantly, I'm just used to it now. When I see people on the street, when I interact with, I just try my best to, again, focus in on them and realize that every interaction is stressful, and you're gonna make an interaction that is gonna calm them, even if they don't smile and they're still grumpy. Um, they've just been confronted with somebody who's interested in them and is calm. And so even though you don't get anything back, it doesn't matter. It's like you are controlling this interaction, by being there with this person and making sure that they know that you respect them. So, like I said, that's the latest one, just because so many retail workers, are just, you can see it on their faces. At the end of the day, they're exhausted.
Okay.
Matt, gonna say something? I feel like you were gonna maybe or Kunga.
Was your question about like a responsibility to teach other people about Dharma?
Well, in that way, without like, so for example, when I see like someone else, like I'm like, they're just a loving, kind person. Like I try to create like through actions, right? Like, hey, come volunteer and do this thing with me, right? Like, because for them, like I'm helping them cultivate good karma, right? And accumulate virtue and merit. So I'm not going to call it that way. Because I see that they're loving, kind, like a teenager, because I work with youth, right? So I'm like, they're like, sometimes people need like positive role modeling, right? And just someone to give them a platform or medium to engage in that positive karmic behavior. So that's just one example in my life, but like relative to, if you see that, do you feel it like almost like your like soul and spirit saying, hey Matt, like the right thing to do is maybe go invite that person to do this thing with you or whatever, like your heart mind is starting to come out more for you to bring people into action bodhicitta without like obviously calling it Dharma or Buddhism, where you see that potential in other people, like Lance may see it in me or Lance sees it in you, right? Is anyone else starting to see that as well in other people, that heart mind, that spiritual system?
Yeah, I think so. I don't at the times when I'm not wrapped up in my own melodrama and my own ego and my own little world of self-importance, which is much more of the time than it is not the case, to be honest. But then, well, yeah, for sure. And I will say, in terms of some of what we were talking about a little bit before about myself and and being part of the group and the practice, definitely more conscious about taking actions to do things for other people more, like particularly with like my parents and other things of like going to spend like good time with them and yeah, go out of my way more. Like it's just again just so wrapped up in my own little things that I'm doing or interested in, or my world where I don't make as much time for other people. And it's not a very transcendent experience or anything, or something people will write books about of great meditative experiences. But there are things that I will feel good about when it comes time for my parents to die, and I'm with them that I've done these things. So it is very meaningful, even these kind of would seem like small changes. But yeah, but I don't ever really like proselytize in any way, like Dharma type of stuff at all. I figure once I get to a point where people notice enough of a change in me and they ask me, well, how did you change? Then I could tell them about it if they want to, or if they are just interested in general. But I'm very averse to proselytizing in any way. Personally, that's just my own aesthetic or something. I don't know.
And
Hi, this is Alex.
Yes, Alex.
I also want to add something. Actually, I really appreciate Lance taking time to share not only his current understanding, but also his path, how he get to it with us. And, I view him as advanced yogi personally, because things that he can do, like I don't think I can do, like although we have huge age difference, uh, like and the experience he got through all the active practice in the teachings for so many years, you can tell he is really teaching, has a lot of confidence in those teachings, and also not just hearing other lamas teaching, but also interacting with them and asking questions and all that. So and he's great also even with younger, like with kids and teenagers. I was helping him out through many lessons, and I personally get a lot of insight and inspiration from that not long ago. So yeah, like definitely I treat Lance as my spiritual guide, just like many other lamas and teachers I met. So, and keeping getting these revelations on things that I thought I knew, but now getting it on a different level. That's certainly great that he's able, like he takes advantage of all this technology now we have through Zoom and all that, and makes it available to us. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Alex. It was very kind of you to say those things. Thank you.
And also, I must add, like, I never seen Lance like kind of noticing somebody's maybe negative behavior or something that maybe could be improved or asked for to be improved. But no, like he like really example, like I know that I could have done many things better, going through these teachings, but I never hear kind of something negative, always more like encouragement. I really appreciate that, because I think the true growth will happen when we find a reason to be motivated from the inside rather than kind of from outside pushing us somewhere. I mean, some people need that, like maybe like Milarepa needed that. Some people like asking for that. Sometimes I want that too, but it's a fine balance. I think a good teacher will know when that works. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you again.
I wanted to respond to Zara's question. I thought in my role at the Grand Rapids Buddhist Temple, it's a lot more active as far as encouraging people to take classes and grow their Buddhist practice. You know, we can be very upfront and specific people because they've come to the temple and they're seeking that kind of support. So I spend a lot of time, you know, talking with the students who take the different classes and encouraging them to take other classes and continue to develop their practice, you know, work to become Dharma teachers, that kind of thing. But in my work at hospice, I think most of my practice is most evident in just trying to be a compassionate listener to my patients and to recognize that they're in a really vulnerable situation and just accept them in that situation as they are and try and create opportunities for them to take control of the situation and handle the situation as best they can based on their experiences and their past, and not to try and impose on them my own views about how things should be, regardless of how different their ideas about life and what's important and what's not important are from my own. Just to kind of be very compassionate and accepting of who they are, and just help them to grow and deal with their stresses as best they can. So they have, you know, a very welcoming experience, like, you know, like Carl Rogers, you know, trying to just be with people and just provide that positive regard. You know, so that's where it comes out. I think my practice comes out in my work. It's just the ability to do that. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I think it's a wonderful group of people that we have, and you know, we're a core here. How many people are here right now? 8 people or something like that. You know, and we're the people that show up, you know, quite regularly and so on, and make comments and take this to heart and so on. And we all have, you know, important things to do in our families and jobs and so on like that. So we do have limited time, and I think we all appreciate that of each other and so on. But you know, and the point is to show that this is an evolutionary thing that you know, our life grows into, that we grow into our spirituality. You know, it doesn't happen right away. You know, and you know, it takes quite a while. It's taken us lifetimes to get to where we are, and there's lifetimes ahead of us. You know, so. So now we're more aware of it than we've ever been before, I think. And that's been our job in this, is to make us aware, to awaken to what is happening, you know, at a spiritual level. And you know, so in this life, what happens in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, who knows? You know, what's going to happen in other lifetimes to come. And it's not going to be as we are. The embodiment of Lance is not going to happen again, nor Brendan or Zara or anybody else, you know. But it's that human spirit, or that human being that, you know, we tune into the radio station and we become the radio station. We become the vibration, and the way it manifests is just it's very natural, and we begin to see that more and more. We have no expectations of how it's going to work. When we try and figure out, oh, this is the way it works, this is the way it works, you know, down to the minutia of things, it's not going to satisfy. It's not going to help us. It's not going to do it, because we start holding on to it. Oh, well, here's my theory. This is the way it works. So we have to just let it go and just let that freedom be our guide. Let that wisdom be our guide. Let that compassion be our guide. And everything else will just fall into its place where it needs to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Lance, like, because chapter 4 is about the action and the karma. Like, I don't like I have developed such a deeper level of peace. Like, I just know, like you just said, if I act from my heart mind with every interaction, that it's going to be okay, right? Like, there's a huge trust now, like from years ago, even last year, where I'm like, what if I fail that audit? What if that person speaks horrible? I don't even think about those things anymore. Like, all that's gone. I just been like, I did the best I could in that interaction from the best place in my heart, and I'm comfortable moving forward. I don't think about those thoughts anymore. It's been remarkable. Like, I'm so much lighter inside. It's beautiful.
Great, great. Brendan, you wanted to say something?
I'm going to also attempt to answer Zara's question. And first of all, Lance, everything that Alex said, I agree with. Yeah, you'd be surprised how much you come up in the Burnett household, Lance, as a topic of conversation. Not just because you have the same name as Lance the Sailor in Apocalypse Now, but you do come up quite frequently. We were talking about Taoism is empirical Buddhism. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we had a great conversation about that recently. So, but I did want to share that, you know, I haven't always been peaceful in my life. I would say 5-10 years ago, I had a tremendous lack of peace. And, you know, I would be very short with my family. And so I believe that what my role is to show my kids, my wife, what is beautiful, to show them calm, to show them peacefulness. And for me, that's the Dharma path, is that informs how I interact with my family. And uh, Carl Jung, whose constant companion was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Carl Jung talked about how the most influential thing on your children's lives is the lives that the parents didn't live. Now think about that a second. So all these disappointments that I as an adult have about my past, unfortunately, these may put upon my children. How unfair is that, right? My children shouldn't suffer because of, you know, whatever I didn't accomplish. So to me, that's all about ego. And for me, the Dharma path is about removing that ego so that I can be the best father that I can be to my children. And I know that's rather long-winded, but you know, I do find teaching moments in the home. I don't proselytize that much, but my wife and kids know how I feel. They know that what I do on Monday nights, and I try to set a good example for them. I don't always succeed. Unfortunately, I do raise my voice now and then, but I know that I shouldn't, and I always apologize if I do. And then I'll just close by saying that, yeah, I do try to build my wife up. You know, I joke and say my wife is the greatest Zen practitioner. And I do that out of love, because there is a lot of Zen qualities that I find in my wife and how she goes about dealing with all the adversity that she finds in her work, in her home. And so I'll just leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you again. Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. What I would like to do is next time is go into these 108 gateways to the Dharma, because I think this is really important, and you're going to see even more important things, you know, and the way in which the sutras work, and how it affect, how we can bring it into our lives, how we can adapt this and apply this into our lives, and there's things here that we do that we don't even recognize yet, that we are doing, you know. So we're all good people, you know, that I'm sure. And so a lot of this we're doing is just a matter of being able to kind of categorize it in ways that we can begin to recognize it, have the confidence in that, and then be able to just rest in that. So so I would like it. It would be great. It would be great for the conversation if you all can read this for next week. If you can read this whole chapter, but particularly from 4.8 to 4.35. So it's what we didn't cover directly didn't cover tonight, but I would like to and there's groupings in this. Here it's just all these stanzas, but there's groupings in those 108 statements. Those 108 gateways are indicated here, and the way they group together. So I'd like to spend time bringing that together so you can see how this has developed into what we probably have studied already in many cases, and things that we need to study that we haven't studied yet. So this is a blueprint. Okay, so unless anybody has something else you'd like to talk about before we close?
Lance, just to confirm, because I do like that you kind of gave us homework. I think that's good for accountability. You want us to read do you want us to focus on anything while we're reading it? Like any kind of indirect questions that you're like, hey, contemplate this while you're reading those?
Well, sure. Take notes and ask questions. What I would like to do is to get into reciting those and then grouping them in short groups and then discussing the groups. So when you read it, I think you'll understand what I'm asking for, and you'll see. Things will come up. So I've read this several times already. To get ready for this. So I want you to have the same kind of an experience. It's great. It's good stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to give a couple commercials. Number one is we're going to start the Milarepa life story this Friday night, and it is 8 installments over a couple of months. There's a couple nights that I can't be present, so we ought to take a break. I've sent you the flyer. Everybody should have that. Maybe I'll send it again, just so you have it again. And then also in a couple of weeks, we're going to take we're going to move. Geshe Jampa is here in Virginia. I've been talking with him over the past year, and he is a Geshe Larampa. The Larampa is the equivalent of a PhD in spiritual philosophy and so on. And he's a terrific person, a great teacher, and a great listener. That's what has impressed me so much. He is like an embodiment of a bodhisattva Buddha. He's a great listener. He's not proselytizing, and but he has comments about things, and he fits things into an understanding that is very, very clear and very good. Very selfless person. So he's going to give us teachings on the Lojong. And the Lojong are the 8 verses of mind training. So he could spend a lot of time talking about it. We've got 2 nights scheduled. We'll see how it goes. But I'm going to send you something in email or in WhatsApp. If you have the opportunity to read it, if you have the opportunity to print it, would be even better, and make notes on it. So that starts in a couple of weeks. So we got some good things coming up with that. Okay, so I'm going to read the dedication prayer. I'm going to recite that. It's on page 36 and 37 of our prayer book. So you can join along, please. This is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun, the founder of the Drikung Kagyu lineage, our lineage. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all.